Hi, Julie Jones from SSB Performance, Smarter, Stronger, Better Mindset Training. Here with this week's Mindset Made Simple Tip of the Week, brought to you by Game Day Sportswear. This week, we're talking about the comparison trap, how it hurts and sometimes helps our performance and what we can do about it. Well, this week, I've been trying to stay off social media. Scrolling has not been good for me. It has made me profoundly sad, and I'll keep the reasons why it's made me sad to myself. But in thinking about staying off social media and how it's affected me over the past few days, it really got me thinking about how it affects me in general. And you probably know what I mean. If you've ever scrolled and checked out what others are doing and felt your stomach drop or felt like, what should I be doing? Well, welcome to the club. The comparison is human, but often we know it's not all that helpful. I often find myself thinking, maybe I should do what they're doing, or I need to catch up with what he or she's doing. And yeah, neither of them are true, usually. And when it's looked at through this perspective, they're not very much help to what I'm doing or trying to build my business or trying to be a good human being, whatever it might be. But the good thing is how we compare is trainable. We never think of it that way, but comparison can be a trainable skill and we can use it to our advantage. Now, as humans, we use other people as mirrors, and we know that. Classic social psychology calls this social comparison. It's a built-in way that we evaluate our abilities and opinions by looking around at other people. And there's tons of that now, as we know, on social media, but not just on social media, but all around us. The person next to us as we're walking down the street, whatever it might be. But whether we look up to someone who's better than us, or we look sort of down at someone who's worse than us, it can shift our mood. It changes our motivation. It affects our choices. Upward looks can inspire, they can inspire growth, or they can trigger doubt. Downward looks can calm us, or it can make us coast. So it depends on our mindset, the context, and what we do next, really what it comes down to. So should we root out comparison? No, but it can be a double-edged sword, and we know this. So often we rely on research to nail down the things we're talking about in these tips and what we should do to improve our performance. But this time, research weighs in and says it's a decisive, it depends on whether social comparison or comparison in general is good for us or not. In athletes and students, upward comparisons often raise anxiety. They dent our global self-esteem, especially when we're in fragile moments. But they can also spark self-improvement when framed as information and growth. Downward comparisons might briefly make us feel a little bit better, but they can also cause us to reduce effort. And that's why when I'm working with my athletes, we talk about converting comparison into data and not the drama that it builds up in us, whether we're 14, 16, 18, or 50, because it's all the same. But this is easier said or done, no matter how old we are. And here's the deal. Those darn algorithms, they know exactly what they're doing. We know that platforms are engineered for surface, eye-popping bests. And as young athletes or any young individual or someone who's not young, but for young athletes in particular, studies linked heavier social media use with more upward comparison, with lower self-esteem, with heightened anxiety, and even depressive symptoms. So, I don't need to tell you about social media. You can do your own research on that. But we're constantly exposed to curated excellence and real-time metrics like likes, views, leaderboards. And these sneak in and take up our mental space. When we're focused on what someone else is doing, we are not focused on what we're doing, and it kicks up that innate negativity bias. And often all we can see is what we're not. But the good news is the effects of comparison are modifiable. We can do things to help us compare better, if you will. What we see and how we interpret it changes the outcome. So once again, it comes down to our number one tool, like we talked about last week, our mindset. There are certainly some good things about comparisons. Think about fitness tracking communities like the Whoop that I have on my wrist. They can motivate through connection and kudos. Good job, good job. You're up on the leaderboard. But the same metrics can nudge obsessive comparison for certain people. I've seen this go both ways. I lead a wellness program called 360 Wellness for a nonprofit. We meet every other week, and we all have Whoop bands provided by the company. Some of the people love this information. There are a couple of us that have been competing throughout the past couple of years, and when we put this on, it was on, game on. But who can burn the most calories? Who can get the best sleep? All this jazz. But others, well, it really sort of made them feel worse about their fitness and their overall health. Focusing on these shared metrics and seeing what others were doing with exercise, sleep, and other things turned into pressure and a way to do more sort of self-loathing. And that's not good. I'm not good enough. When I'm not comparing to her, she's more fit, blah, blah, blah. It can be unhelpful. So comparisons can build and they can bruise both our internal and our external climates. Comparison isn't limited to social media or fitness trackers or high school hallways. If we think of our role as leaders, as coaches, as bosses, whatever we are, we're major players in the comparison game too. I think back to my career and think about how we compared kids, and I'm like, oh gosh, now that I think of it, I don't know if that was the right way to do it. But when we step back and think about how we contribute to comparison, since we shape the motivational climate in our organizations, and comparison can drive or detract from motivation, we need to think about how we're using this to our advantage or to our detriment. We've all been around coaches who try to use comparison as a motivator, but often it backfires. And I remember watching a coach that I worked with way back in the day, way back in Cleveland State, and he yelled out to the court, he's like, "Get the ball to Audra, she's an All-American." And of course, Audra was good. I don't think she was ever an All-American, but the coach was pointing out that she was the stud. We needed to get her the ball. We need to be like her. And in this case, I don't think it helped everyone around Audra. And I don't really think it helped Audra either. But what I'm sure some of them were hearing, or at least one person on the court heard, I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but they heard that you're not good enough. So get rid of the ball quickly. And what do you think that did to performance? Comparing, I'm not good enough, blah, blah, blah. Now I have to second guess. And then we go down this negative performance spiral. Now, I'm not saying we don't call out our superstars and hold them up for others to model or to even applaud. There's not a professional team on the planet that doesn't highlight an individual. It's Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Tom Brady and the Patriots, right? Michael Jordan and the Bulls, LeBron James and the Lakers. That we must be cognizant of how we use comparison and what it does to the people around us. Now, research shows that a task or mastery climate where we emphasize effort, learning, role clarity, this supports well-being and self-discipline. If we promote an ego or performance climate where we highlight public rankings, call out who's better or worse, this can spike pressure in maladaptive comparisons, and it makes sense. Thus, it's up to us to use comparison to model process and progress over outcome. Now, does this sound all Pollyanna? A little bit, right? But often these days, comparison really isn't used as a tool to help us. So we need to think about how we can make it advantageous. And as always, it starts with our mindset. How we interpret comparison drives what happens next. Enter in Dr. Dweck's growth mindset idea, which leads us to an upward comparison, which can read as a roadmap of what can I learn? But the flip side of that coin is the fixed mindset, which we know that we're all sort of in the middle of both of these. And this mindset reads as comparison as a verdict, as if I'm not good enough. So what can we do? We can help our athletes reframe what they see and turn it into the data, not the drama, as I mentioned before. And instead of worrying if we're as good as Audra, we can ask, what's one behavior that she does that I can test this week? So instead of keeping the thought that she's just faster, and that's just the way that it is, that fixed mindset, and letting that eat at us, we can move from outcome to process with something that we can execute. We talked about what we talk about has to be executable. So something like her first 3 steps are violent. If I train my first 3 steps daily, maybe I can get a little faster. So we can make notes, we can name what we see, then we can narrow it down to one action that can help make us better. We can also influence our algorithm. It doesn't take long to get different stuff to pop up on your feed. I mean, heck, sometimes I even think about a product and all of a sudden it's showing up on my feed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even think I said that out loud yet. But we can make our algorithm work for us by following process-focused accounts. We can unlike the tools, just like we do when we manage our focus, we can sort of take some of those distractions out and unfollow or mute those known triggers. It takes discipline to do that, but I'm sure that it's worth it. That's what I've been trying to do this week. I'll keep trying to do it because I know it's better for me. We can also implement a post-game pause, which is another positive move. We can institute a 12 to 24-hour no posting, no scrolling window after competition to minimize our rumination and hot comparisons right out of the gate when we're still emotional. This can give us time to process our own performance without outside influence. And then we can go back to our handy and helpful evidence journal. If we just take a few minutes each day to log 3 controllables that we executed, 1 adjustment that we can make, and 1 win unrelated to stats, unrelated to outcome, then we're training back to our RAS, our reticular activating system, to spot progress and not just threats. And we're reminding ourselves of our own progress and our own highlights, not just the perfected images that we see of others out in front of us. So comparison isn't going away. Our brains are wired to do it. But if we use it right, we may not want it to. When we treat comparison as information, we can turn all of a sudden I can't talk, a performance hazard into a performance lever. Just like the power moves say, we can always change our thoughts. We can curate our inputs and our outputs and keep our behaviors competitive, not comparative. And there's a time to look around. Figuring it out is the key. But figuring out how to use this to our advantage can change our performance. So until next week, have a great week or not. The choice is up to you.